The Raiders are still reeling from the disastrous Josh McDaniels hire. While everyone already knew Josh was a snake, a long time ago there was a beef involving the Raiders and another young head coach that was way uglier, pettier, and oftentimes absurd.
That's an absurd proposition!
You're an absurd proposition!
Yes, before Josh McDaniels, there was Lane Kiffin. And it's a story you need to hear. Al Davis and Lane Kiffin were a match made in hell. Davis made Kiffin the youngest head coach in modern NFL history, ignored his pleas to draft a future Hall of Famer with the first overall pick, called him a liar, fired him on the phone, and used an overhead projector to tell everyone why he was right to fire him. Oh, and then not pay him. Lane Kiffin will be paid $9 million to coach the Ole Miss Rebels in 2024. He's 48. He's won 94 games at the college level, he's won 3 bowl games, and he's beyond set for life. But nearly 2 decades ago, he was part of one of the great college football dynasties of all time, coaching wide receivers and eventually calling the plays for Pete Carroll's offense at USC. Kiffin is the son of legendary defensive coordinator Monte Kiffin, and has now reworked his image. See, after the Raiders, he pulled some snake-like stuff out of his ass and slithered away from another SEC school. But that's not the story today. Al Davis was a maverick, a jack of all trades in the NFL, and one of the most stubborn men in its history. Born in 1929, Davis was never a gifted athlete. He was a reserve on the Erasmus Hall High School football team in Brooklyn, but fell in love with coaching. After 3 years in the college ranks, Davis began his NFL career as a scout for the Baltimore Colts before joining the AFL as a wide receivers coach for the San Diego Chargers in the early 60s. Davis moved north to Oakland, where he was named head coach of the Raiders, eventually assumed power of the entire AFL as commissioner, then becoming part owner, GM, and finally principal owner of the Raiders by the time the NFL and the AFL merged. He guided the Raiders to 3 Super Bowls. He was also an enthusiastic leader in the pursuit of civil rights, once refusing to play a preseason game in Mobile, Alabama, where his black players would have to stay in a separate hotel from his white players. People forget just how much of a badass Al Davis was. Years later, he locked horns with Commissioner Paul Tagliabue when he moved the Raiders to Los Angeles, and eventually moved them back to Oakland, where they made a 4th Super Bowl appearance in 2002. Then, the wheels came off. 5 years later, 78-year-old Davis identified USC's offensive coordinator, a man 47 years his junior, to resuscitate his floundering team. Al Davis appointed Lane Kiffin, then 31 years old, as head coach on January 23, 2007, making Kiffin the youngest head coach in modern NFL history, surpassing both Eric Mangina and Mike Tomlin. Kiffin signed a 2-year contract valued at approximately $4 million, which is like $50 million nowadays with inflation, with the team option for 2009. Davis had a history of selecting young up-and-coming coaches in their 30s, like John Madden, Mike Shanahan, and John Gruden, all Super Bowl winners, but only Madden with the Raiders. Davis himself was 34 when he assumed coaching duties for the Raiders. Maybe he thought he could control Kiffin. Maybe he was wrong. Kiffin inherited the 1st overall pick in the stacked 2007 draft that included names like Calvin Johnson, Patrick Willis, Joe Thomas, Adrian Peterson, and Darrelle Revis. Spoiler alert, they didn't end up with any of those guys. Kiffin was not interested in LSU quarterback Jamarcus Russell. That didn't matter. He wasn't running the show. Davis was hypnotized by Russell's performance in the Sugar Bowl, and when Al Davis fell in love, he didn't let go. Kiffin wanted Calvin Johnson, calling him the best wide receiver he had ever seen at the time. And he was right. Kiffin later said he begged Al Davis to take Megatron and sign Jeff Garcia in free agency. Of course, we know what happened. The Raiders finished 4-12, a disaster of a season mired with tough press conferences, and a vocal Al Davis openly criticizing Kiffin. The media had a field day with this. When questioned by players about rumors linking him to college coaching vacancies, Kiffin dismissed them, asserting that he never considered leaving. This was back in the days when Nick Saban left the Dolphins for Alabama and Bobby Petrino ghosted the Falcons for Arkansas. But it appeared Kiffin was serious about his commitment to the Raiders and building a winner in Oakland. On January 25th, 2008, the late great Chris Mortensen reported that there were tensions between Davis and Kiffin, with Davis attempting to push Kiffin to resign. According to a source allegedly close to Kiffin, he refused to resign, which would have resulted in the forfeiture of his $2 million salary for the remaining guaranteed year of his contract. The Raiders, however, refuted the claims, while Kiffin opted not to provide comment. By September 15th, 2008, NBC Sports reported Davis's dissatisfaction with Kiffin and his intention to terminate him the following Monday or Tuesday. Eventually, by the end of the month, after a 1-3 start to the season, Davis pulled the trigger and fired Kiffin just 20 games into his tenure. You'd think firing someone would be the end of it. It was actually the start. Davis was now an open book, ready to explain to the press why he had made the decision he had and why he was in the right. He even rolled out an overhead projector to make his point. That's right, like it was social studies class in 1992. In a league where everything notable or interesting is kept secret, the 80-year-old owner of the Raiders pulled back the curtain. Davis came out the gate firing shots, saying, "I wasn't hiring the person I thought I was hiring." Davis then revealed that he had fired Kiffin not in person, but over the phone, dismissing him with cause. Translation: he wasn't going to pay him the rest of his contract, $2.6 million that Davis was going to keep in his pocket. Here's where the projector comes in play. There were reports that Davis had written a letter warning Kiffin that if he violated the terms of his contract, he would be fired for cause. At the time, no one knew the contents of that letter, just that it was salacious. But Davis wanted to air it out and use the projector to show that letter to everybody in the room and everyone watching on TV. He read it word for word. Davis claimed that while Kiffin complained about not having a say in player personnel, he was explicit about your desire to sign Javon Walker, D'Angelo Hall, among others. Javon Walker, by the way. Essentially, Davis was admitting that those free agent signees were busts, but it was somehow Kiffin's fault. But it's nothing compared to the next thing Davis wrote in the letter, these immortal words. "I do realize that you did not want us to draft Jamarcus Russell. He is a great player. Get over it and coach this team on the field. That is what you were hired to do. We can win with this team." And yes, that was a quote directly from Davis's letter, not a tweet from Donald Trump. Davis claimed that Kiffin was using the media to place blame on the Raiders rather than accepting the blame himself. According to Davis, his liaison with the press was Chris Mortensen, who Davis called a professional liar. Was Kiffin trying to sway public perception, or was the public perception the truth? But the truth was, the Raiders were a mess.
Wow. The Raiders suck.
Davis ended the televised press conference with a long, unrecorded exchange with reporters. And Davis told reporters, "I think Kiffin conned me, like he conned all you people." Davis then went on a whirlwind Q&A that touched on stem cells, his estate tax, and accusing Broncos head coach Mike Shanahan of insubordination and cheating. The man really knew how to hold a grudge, and Kiffin was the latest recipient of his legendary ire. Kiffin's scheduled post-firing press conference was then canceled. He later filed a grievance against the Raiders, contending wrongful termination. However, on November 15, 2010, an arbitrator ruled in favor of Davis, affirming cause for Kiffin's dismissal. Now, Kiffin, post-Raiders, kind of reinforced the shit Al Davis was saying. He tried to lure away Raiders assistants to come with him to Tennessee. He left Tennessee high and dry for the USC job. He took a back step as Alabama's OC and left them high and dry at the CFP to go coach Florida Atlantic. They lost. He used Florida Atlantic as a stepping stone to land the Ole Miss job, so maybe the Crypt Keeper was onto something. He just did it the wrong way. Despite the strained relationship between the Raiders and Kiffin, Lane issued a statement upon Al Davis's passing on October 2011, acknowledging their checkered history but expressing gratitude for the opportunity Davis provided him. Kiffin conveyed nothing but the greatest respect for the late Raiders owner. Kiffin took the high road. Davis's legacy lives on with his son Mark. It's a strange, complicated legacy, but you simply can't tell the story of the NFL without Al Davis and his contributions, his hardball tactics, his overwhelming success, and the tumultuous final years of his career. Kiffin, meanwhile, has found his spot in the college ranks and has kept his nose clean at Ole Miss. Al Davis and Lane Kiffin were both winners when it comes down to it. They just met at the wrong time.